There are moments in history when the world doesn't simply watch, it listens. Not because of a bloodshed or disaster, but because a nation once silenced begins to speak boldly and clearly in its own voice. For decades, the narrative of the African continent has been penned by hands that never touched its soil and voices that never felt its heat. We have been told that Africa is poor, that its people are helpless, and that its destiny is forever tied to the charity of others. But today, we strip away the veil of this convenient fiction. The truth is as simple as it is devastating. The only reason why an African country will be poor, with bad roads, crumbling infrastructure, and no food, is because its leaders are thieves. It is not a lack of wealth, for the earth beneath our feet is heavy with gold and promise. It is a lack of character at the top. Today, that nation breaking the silence is Burkina Faso. For years, this landlocked country was seen only through the lens of instability, droughts, and displacement. A country with little visibility on the world stage. Its resources were extracted, its people marginalized, and its future dictated by decisions made in foreign capitals. To the distant observer, it was simply another forgotten state, dependent and fragile. But in September 2022, the script was torn apart. A young artillery captain named Ibrahim Traoré stepped into power. He was not a career politician, and he carried no colonial pedigree. Instead, they arrived with something far more dangerous to the global status quo: vision. Stay with us. This is more than a headline. It is a hinge in history. If this story resonates, show your support with a like, a comment, or a subscription. It means more than numbers. It keeps the story alive. From his first address, Captain Traoré made one thing clear. Burkina Faso would no longer kneel. Not to foreign armies, not to predatory lenders, and certainly not to false promises wrapped in aid packages. There is a prevailing lie that wisdom is the exclusive province of the old, that leadership requires decades of political maneuvering. Yet, here stands a man of 37 years, proving that greatness has absolutely nothing to do with age. While the vice presidents of neighboring nations flaunt supercars and villas bought with the bread of the poor, Traoré remains a soldier of the people. He does not seek the luxury of a supercar because his eyes are fixed on the necessity of a tractor, a school, and a hospital. The contrast is stark and undeniable. In some corners of the continent, leaders of 92 years cling to power, surrounded by a crew of 70-year-olds who have seen the world change while they remain stagnant. They drive big cars in places where there are no roads, a paradox that reveals a deep lack of empathy and a mountain of greed. But in Ouagadougou, the rhythm has changed. Traoré is not just speaking of sovereignty. He is building it with Burkinabe fingerprints. He is reclaiming the land, the wealth, and the voice of a people who were told to wait for permission to prosper. Within months, the world witnessed projects that seemed unimaginable just a short time ago. A national airline was reborn, rural hospitals opened their doors, and cashew factories began rising from the ground. Gold refineries are being built by local hands, ensuring that the wealth of the soil stays in the pockets of the sons and daughters of the land. Infrastructure, industry, and identity are all being rewritten. This is not a fairy tale. The challenges remain enormous. Economic pressure, insecurity, and geopolitical tensions loom like shadows. Yet, what sets this moment apart is that for the first time in a generation, the people are not waiting. They are building. As the legendary Chinua Achebe wrote, "When the moon is shining, even the lame become hungry for a walk." In Burkina Faso, the moon is not just shining, it is blazing. The international community watches with bated breath, wondering how a young captain can achieve what decades of aid could not. They ask, who is truly behind this movement? And why does the simple act of a leader handing over keys to motorcycles to protect his citizens feel like a revolutionary act? We are entering an era where the old guards are trembling. The era of the thief leader is being challenged by the era of the servant soldier. But as the foundations of the old system begin to crack, the empire is preparing to strike back. What happens when a leader decides that his people's safety is more important than diplomatic niceties? What happens when 2,000 motorcycles become a symbol of a nation's refusal to be terrorized? To build sovereignty, one does not begin with grand speeches in international forums. One begins by ensuring that the citizen can sleep soundly in their own home. In an ideal world, security is as natural as breath, a default right. But in West Africa, security has long been commodified, turned into a bargaining chip used by old powers to maintain a grip on young nations. They claimed that without their protection, cities would fall. They whispered that without their heavy armor, darkness would prevail. Yet, Captain Ibrahim Traoré saw a different truth. An army is only as strong as its mobility, and a heart is only as brave as its connection to the soil it defends. Look closely at the streets of Ouagadougou. This was not a hollow parade of heavy tanks or expensive fighter jets meant to intimidate the populace. It was a revolution of mobility. 2,000 motorcycles were handed over to the National Police Force. To a Western observer, 2,000 two-wheeled vehicles might seem modest. But for the terrain of Burkina Faso, where the narrow alleys of the city and the rugged trails of the countryside are where crime hides, these are the iron steeds of a new era. Let us take a moment here, not to rush forward, but to give thanks. Write a comment with a simple "thank you" to Traoré, to Burkina Faso, or to the spirit of sovereignty itself. Gratitude is not a formality. It is recognition. It is dignity expressed in words. When you add your voice of thanks, you are not just engaging with a video. You are standing in solidarity with a story of freedom and pride. So, before we continue, take this pause to comment your thank you. Together, those words become a beacon that shines far beyond the screen. Why does this moment carry such symbolic weight? Because for decades, the defense budgets of many nations were swallowed by the calloused greed of an aging elite. Money vanished into offshore accounts or was spent on luxury assets that served the leader, not the country. Here, we see a complete inversion of that logic. Traoré does not buy a supercar for his own glory. He buys the means for a constable to reach a village in need. This is the definition of service, taking the resources of the people and returning them as peace of mind. The National Recovery Plan for 2026 to 2030 places security as the cornerstone of the temple. Without safety, the farmer cannot sow seeds in the field, the teacher cannot reach the school, and the harvest of development is strangled in the crib. When the captain handed over those keys, he wasn't just delivering hardware, he was delivering a promise that no inch of the motherland will be ceded to criminals, and no citizen will be left to feel forgotten in the shadows of insecurity. We are witnessing the rise of a leadership that understands that modern power does not always require billion-dollar contracts with multinational arms giants. Sometimes, it requires understanding what the calloused hands of your people truly need. With a new class of 2,000 trainees arriving in March, the message is clear. The state is reclaiming its role as the guardian of the streets. But remember, every step towards self-reliance comes with a cost. When you start to arm yourselves, when you start to protect yourself without asking permission from the old masters, you are sending a signal of defiance. The world is watching, and the enemies of independence are watching too. They ask themselves, what happens if this model succeeds? What happens if the neighboring countries also decide to reject the aid that comes with chains and choose instead the path of self-led security? Freedom is never a gift. It is a fortress built stone by stone, patrol by patrol. And as those 2,000 engines roar into life, the sound is more than mechanical. It is the heartbeat of a nation waking up. But will this internal strength be enough to withstand the invisible pressures from abroad, those who are even now scripting the downfall of this Burkina dream? When the foundation of security is laid, the structure of sovereignty begins to rise. But real independence is not just about guarding the streets. It is about who controls the gold in the ground and the currency in the pocket. For decades, the global financial system has operated like a one-way mirror, designed for the West to see everything and for Africa to see only what it is allowed to. They told us that without the US dollar or the euro, a nation would wither. They claimed that without the approval of Washington or Paris, development was a mirage. But in the halls of power in Ouagadougou, a new arithmetic is being written. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is not playing by the old rules of the debt trap. While others were begging for conditional loans that come with chains, he was looking for partners who respect the dignity of the soil. This is why the world stood still when a $15 billion agreement was signed with India. Not as aid, not as a handout, but as a direct investment in the future of Burkina Faso. From petrochemicals to steel, from energy to telecommunications, the blueprint is clear. The resources of the land must serve the people of the land. Before we reveal the next chapter, which is perhaps the most powerful assertion of sovereignty you will ever hear, I want to pause and speak directly to you. If this channel has moved you, if these stories are touching something deep in your spirit, then consider becoming a member. Not for exclusive content or perks, but because supporting this channel is directly supporting narratives that mainstream media refuses to tell. Every membership is a vote for Pan-Africa Spotlight's mission. Every member becomes a co-creator of the revolution we are documenting. I drank us. Stand with the principle that African wealth belongs to Africa. This shift has sent a geopolitical shockwave through the capitals of the West. Why? Because for the first time, a small West African nation is openly experimenting with transactions outside the traditional financial order. When you build your own gold refineries, you stop being a mere exporter of raw materials and start being a master of your own value. This is the pivot. It is the moment a nation moves from the waiting room of history to the boardroom of its own destiny. But as the signatures were dried on these new contracts, a different kind of pressure began to mount. The international system, uncomfortable with a leader who cannot be bought, began to tighten its grip. Whispers of red notices and legal warrants started to circulate through Interpol and diplomatic channels. They call it justice. The people call it a weapon. It is a pattern as old as time. When a leader refuses to be a puppet, the strings are replaced by a noose. The question is no longer just about economics. It is about the price of defiance. What happens when a young captain looks into the cameras of the world and tells a global power that they have 48 hours to respect his continent or leave? This is not just a policy change. It is a psychological liberation. But as the City of Dignity begins its construction with 50,000 new homes, the shadows of the old empire are lengthening. They are asking, how far will this soldier go? And more importantly, how much is he willing to lose to keep his people free? Behind the military fatigues and the stern gaze of the artillery captain lies a story, not of a man seeking a throne, but of a soldier haunted by the silence of the graveyard. Every leader in history pays a price for their convictions. But for Ibrahim Traoré, the currency is not gold. It is the very air he breathes and the ground he walks upon. To choose the path of dignity in a world that profits from your dependency is to invite a storm that never ends. The global system does not forgive those who break the script of the beggar nation. It does not pardon the young who dare to be wiser than the old. What is the true motivation of a 37-year-old who refuses the comfort of a palace? The answer is found in the calloused hands of the Burkina Faso people. It is found in the eyes of the widows of soldiers who fell because they lacked the mobility to fight back. Traoré's drive is not fueled by the desire for a supercar or a villa in the south of France. It is fueled by the ancestral debt he owes to a land that has given everything and received nothing. He is a man who knows that in the game of geopolitics, if you are not at the table, you are on the menu. And he has decided once and for all that Burkina Faso will no longer be the meal. Now, let us turn this story into a shared moment. Write in the comments where you are watching from. Your city, your country, your corner of the world. Pan-Africa Spotlight will read them with gratitude, and we send to each of you a heartfelt wish. May your journey be filled with dignity, hope, and light. This is more than a video. It is a gathering of voices across the globe. But let us speak of the price. The price of sovereignty is the loneliness of the defiant. While the thief leaders of the past were toasted in Western capitals, Traore is met with sanctions and diplomatic cold shoulders. The system attempts to choke the economy, hoping that hunger will succeed where bullets failed. They label the pursuit of independence as instability and the reclamation of resources as radicalism. Yet, inside the borders of the motherland, a different system is being born. A system of vigilantes for the defense of the homeland, where the civilian and the soldier become one shield. Is this a dangerous gamble? Maybe. To stand against the inertia of decades requires more than just courage. It requires a willingness to be the villain in someone else's history book so that you can be the hero in your own children's future. The city of dignity is not just being built with bricks and mortar. It is being built with the refusal to accept the crumbs fallen from the master's table. Every factory that opens, every gold bar that is refined on home soil, is a strike against the invisible chains that have bound West Africa for centuries. The shadows are deepening. There are whispers of coordinated efforts to restore the old order, a polite term for returning the keys of the country to the thieves who sold it. The international community speaks of democracy, but the people on the ground speak of survival and pride. As we move towards the final chapter of this unfolding revolution, a haunting question remains. Can a single flame withstand a hurricane? Or is the fire Traore started now so vast that no amount of external wind can put it out? We have reached the final chapter of this journey, a chapter written not with ink on paper, but with sweat on construction sites and unwavering resolve in the eyes of a new generation. As we look back at what has unfolded, from the 2,000 motorcycles guarding the streets to the billion-dollar contracts shifting the financial axis, we see a truth far greater than mere politics. It is the collapse of an ancient myth, the myth of African helplessness. For too long, the world looked at this continent and saw only hands outstretched for aid. Today, they see hands gripping the tools to build their own future. The rise of Burkina Faso under Ibrahim Traoré is not just the story of a single nation. It is a contagious awakening. From the markets of Ouagadougou to the most remote villages, faith has returned. The people no longer ask, "When will we be helped?" Instead, they ask, "What shall we build next?" This is the shift from the mindset of a victim to the mindset of a master. When dignity has been ignited, no embargo or diplomatic isolation can extinguish its flame. What you have witnessed today is not a conclusion, but an opening. Africa's story of pride and independence is still being written, and each voice that joins makes the chorus stronger. Subscribe now, not as a favor, but as a commitment to follow this journey. Because the next video will not just continue the story, it may reshape how you see the world. Do not let this moment pass into silence. Subscribe, and stand ready for the chapter that comes after this one. We close this narrative with a sense of sober hope. The challenges ahead remain: pressures from powers that dread a self-reliant Africa, internal economic hurdles, and the century-long war against poverty. However, history has proven that once the seeds of dignity are planted in the mother soil, the harvest of freedom becomes inevitable. The path is long, the road is steep, but the destination is clear. In the heart of West Africa, a young captain and a resilient people have proven that the age of the thief leader is ending. They have shown that when a leader chooses service over greed, and a nation chooses pride over dependency, the world has no choice but to listen. Ibrahim Traoré is not just a leader for today. He has become a symbol of what is possible when the youth of a continent decide that enough is enough. The dawn is no longer a distant promise. It is breaking right now over the hills of Burkina Faso. And as the light spreads, it carries a message to every corner of the globe. Africa is not for sale. Africa is not a pawn. And above all, Africa bows to no one. The story of Ibrahim Traoré and the people of Burkina Faso is the story of all of us who believe that dignity is non-negotiable.